Chapter 7. She's Going to Cook Me. Autumn came. The forest had a new look. The tree leaves turned yellow and began to fall. It grew harder to find berries to eat. He could still climb the trees for walnuts, but their shells were hard and had to be cracked with a stone. There were more and more mushrooms. He didn't recognize most of them and ate only the ones he knew from Blondie. The nice days were fewer. He was wet most of the time. Sometimes as dusk approached, he slipped from the forest to steal food from a village. But the farmers, perhaps because of the approaching winter, now kept nearly everything under lock and key. Often, when he woke in the morning, the puddles of rainwater had a thin layer of ice. It was hard to pull the last carrots and radishes in the vegetable gardens from the frozen earth. The tomatoes and cucumbers were long gone. He was hungry and freezing. Skirting a village one day, he saw an elderly farmer chopping wood, his jacket hanging on a fence post. After a while, the farmer put down his axe and entered his house. Srillex grabbed the jacket and ran. It was made of thick wool and had a lining. He shortened the sleeves with his piece of glass, found some rope, picked it apart, and tied the pieces of his sleeve to his feet with his strands. Sometimes he tried making a fire with Marie's magnifying glass. It rarely worked. Either the sun didn't stay out long enough or else it was too wet. One night it began to snow. It was still snowing in the morning. Shivering from the cold, Srillex left the forest and went to look for work. It snowed all day. He plodded through the snow for hours until toward evening. He reached a village half buried beneath a white blanket. A cold wind was blowing. There wasn't a soul in sight, not even a dog. Snow covered the houses, the thatched roofs, the bare treetops, the empty wagons in the farmyards, the wells and the fences. Narrow paths had been cleared by the doors of the houses. Srillex walked in the tracks of the footprints that ran through the village. A pale light shone in some windows. He entered a farmyard, went to the hayloft, and fell asleep bundled in his jacket. His sleep was fitful. Now and then he awoke, shivering and feverish. He dreamed that he and his mother were in the clutches of the Gestapo. A stranger was pretending to be his father. He awoke in a fright. "I'm sick," he thought. "Always go to the poor people. Srillex, they're more willing to help." "Yes, Papa." When he opened his eyes in the morning, he didn't know where he was. His head hurt. He tried getting up and fell down. He crawled through the darkness toward the light from the door and pulled himself to the feet by leaning against the wall. The weather was gray and wintry. The farmyard didn't look especially poor. Although he wanted to knock on the door, he moved on. It wasn't far from the farmhouse to the next. Yet the distances seemed far greater than usual. Every step felt like his last. He had to force himself to pull his foot out of the snow and take another stride. His only desire was to lie down. Suddenly, everything vanished, and he saw only the gray sky. "You have to stay alive, Srillex." "Yes, Papa." He must have fallen. Mustering his will, he picked himself up. In front of him was a house with an old ruin next to it, and a fence around part of the yard. These must be poor people, he thought. His vision grew blurred. He was seeing double. Rubbing his eyes, he made a supreme effort to climb the steps to the door. He knocked, and again, after a while, the door opened just a crack. Through the crack, he made out a woman's face. She was the prettiest woman he had ever seen. Then, everything went blank. When he opened his eyes again, he was lying on a soft mattress. The pretty woman, who seemed to belong to some dream, was leaning over him. Above her was the ceiling of a house. Slowly, he realized he was not a dream, but the person who had opened the door. She was looking at him anxiously. "You're awake?" "Yes, ma'am." The woman went over to a large pot on the fire. "She's going to cook me and eat me," he thought. She lifted the pot and poured hot water into a wooden tub. Then she undressed him and examined him. "What will she do to me now?" he thought helplessly. Shaking her head, she examined his sores and put him in the tub. The water was very hot, and he yelled. She scrubbed him thoroughly without spraying the soap. Then she took him from the tub, dried him, laid him in front of the stove, and smeared his body with a black salve. His sores hurt. He moaned and groaned. The woman went off for a while. When she came back, she moved his mattress closer to the stove and added wood to the fire. "Now she'll throw me into it," Srillex thought. But she merely covered him with a blanket. Though his whole body was smarting, he fell asleep with a hopeful feeling. That feeling was justified. In the days to come, the woman took care of him devotedly, and Srillex recovered to his strength. She gave him good, warm clothes to wear. "What did you do with my old ones?" he asked. "I threw them out." He grieved for them until she took down Marie's magnifying glass from a mantel and gave it to him. Christmas time came. Srilla could already say the Catholic prayers. He never touched his food until the pretty woman had said grace and he had crossed himself. Around his neck he had hung a cross and a medallion of the Madonna holding baby Jesus. One day she brought him a pair of shoes. They were big for him. She stuffed them with newspaper. That's what my mother used to do, Srillex said. Don't tell me anything about yourself, she told him. It's better for me not to know. Just tell me how old you are. He thought for a moment. I was 8 last summer, he said. What should I call you? Jurek Staniak. That's a fine name, the woman said. She wouldn't let him go near the windows during the day. At night, after she lit the kerosene lamp in the main room, he had to stay in an alcove in the back. It was dark there, and the windows were covered by thick curtains. Why? He asked. At first she wouldn't tell him. Then she did. I have 2 sons in the partisans. Do you know what that is? He nodded. I had a daughter, too, but the Germans tortured her and hung her in the forest. She couldn't have told where her father and brothers were, even if she had wanted to. She didn't know. Her eyes were dry as she told them this. Her face was pale and severe. I think they've left me here as bait. They keep me under surveillance to see who visits me. That's why I have to hide you. It's too dangerous to run the risk of going out or being seen through a window. And at night, when the lamp is lit, you could be spotted even more easily. I'm afraid that you won't be able to stay here. If the Germans come looking for my husband or sons, they may kill you. She opened a trapdoor in the kitchen. A ladder led down from it to a basement full of vegetables. Meanwhile, if anything happens, I'll hide you here, she said. He helped her to decorate the little Christmas tree she brought home. On Christmas Eve, she lit some candles on the tree. He watched from the door of the alcove as she knelt and prayed, beating her breast. The next day, she gave him a hat. He took fright. Don't worry, she said. I'm not sending you away just yet. She told him to go to the alcove, shut the door, and knock. When she opened it, he was to enter the big room, take off his hat, and say, Blessed be Jesus Christ. Then he would wait for her to answer, forever and ever, Amen. They practiced it a few times. Finally, she said, Very good. And what will you say when you're asked where you're from and who your parents are? You have to be prepared. I don't know. She sat him down in front of her and told him, You were born in a little village. You don't remember its name. You don't know how old you are. All you remember is that one day your father hitched the horses to the wagon, loaded all your belongings on it, and set out with you and your mother. I don't have any brothers or sisters? No, you're an only child. I used to be the youngest, he said. The 3 of you set out. The road was full of wagons, horses, cars, and soldiers. You don't remember how long you traveled. All of a sudden you heard a loud noise. A plane flew over you very low on a strafing run. Bullets hit your wagon and your horse. Your parents fell and didn't move. They didn't answer when you called to them. Their clothes were sticky and red. Some people took you to their village. You don't remember how long you were there, but the man got drunk and beat you, so you left. Since then, you've drifted from place to place. Can you remember all that? No. Every day she repeated the story to him. He didn't have to remember it exactly as she told it, she said. He just had to know some version of it by heart. When he was asked about himself, he had to tell as if it were true. One day she asked without warning, Where are you from? I don't remember. Where are your parents? They were killed when a plane strafed our wagon. How old are you? I guess I'm 9. Very good, she praised him. Now I'll teach you what to do when the people you work for take you to church. What people? Whoever. She explained what he should do when entering the church and leaving it. During the service, he should imitate the others. A few days later, she woke him one morning and told him the time had come. He had to go to another village because his presence might already have been detected. During the night, she had heard voices and footsteps outside the house. She sewed the sleeves of the wool jacket that he had shortened and helped him into it, even though he could do it by himself. Then she handed him a bag with some provisions and said, If you're ever in bad trouble, you can always come back to me. And if you can't get here, go to a church and ask the priest for help. She regarded him. You're an enchanting child, Jurek. People will always help you. He looked at the pretty woman. She didn't look so poor to him. She just looked very sad and lonely. Maybe, he thought, sad, lonely people could be trusted just like poor people. The weeks of living with her had made him strong and healthy. He'd even put on weight. Setting out into the snowy world this morning, he felt not only better physically, but more confident. He now knew what to do and how to behave. He wasn't Srillex anymore. He was Jurek Staniak. He touched the cross and the Madonna around his neck, as if to verify this. The villages were not far apart. A few kilometers was all that lay between them. 2 or 3 hours of walking in the snow brought him to the next one. This time he didn't go looking for a hovel at the village's end. He picked the biggest, wealthiest-looking farmhouse and knocked on the door. It opened. A wave of warmth from the heat inside enveloped him. Jurek Staniak took off his hat and said in a clear voice, "Blessed be Jesus Christ." The expected answer came at once. He was invited to come in.